Hi there, I hope you're well. So today is the latest for May 2025 UK House Price Index for Scotland. What I'm basically sharing here is the movement that's happening in the property market, things that may be affected. We're looking at regional locations as well throughout Scotland. So we're looking at Scotland as a whole, and then we'll drill it into Fife, Edinburgh, the Lothians, Glasgow, Dundee, and give you a good insight as to what is potentially happening, not just with house pricing, but also in regards to transactions. So that's property that's exchanged. So the report's just been announced, and generally what I would do is I'll go through the initial executive statement that comes out with the report and cover some of the key things that are relevant to yourself. So at the moment, what they're basically saying, and I'm just going to show you the headlines of this. What you're looking at here is the headline stats. So the economic statement basically is saying that the headlines are reading as £192,000 is the average price of a Scottish home. The annual price change in properties throughout Scotland has increased by 6.4%. This is compared to May 25 to May 24, but the monthly price change has remained static. So what they've done is issued those numbers, and then what we're going to look at doing is what does that really mean in real terms? So the total transaction volumes and new build volumes in property calculated by the House Price Index estimates increased by those numbers, as I say. So what they're saying is that with the land registry, 40% have been processed and increased in numbers in regards to new build properties. And then volume transactions for older properties have lessened, and we're going to cover those off when we get to those. But the average house price in Scotland, as I said, it's increased by 6.4% in the 12 months to May 2025. The average price is up to £192,000. This is up from 6.2% in the previous 12 months to April of 24, and above actually the average within the UK. The UK average is sitting at 3.9. So Scotland as a whole actually is performing really strongly compared to that. So Scotland at 6.4%, UK as a whole at 3.9%. If we then look at what does that mean in regards to terms over the next 12 months, on a seasonally adjusted basis. So what we mean by seasonally adjusted is that there may be some alterations as we go through these each month, and that's purely and simply because the land registry works 3 months in arrears in regards to the data that they can have. So we're waiting basically for that recording. So what they do is they do a seasonally adjusted, which is basically working out what the average percentage is, and then they give you the true stats as we go through the year. So that's what the seasonally adjusted element means for yourself. In Scotland, detached houses had the highest annual percentage change out of all the property types. That increased by 9.3% in the 12 months to May 24. That increased number is £358,000 as well for your average detached property in Fife. Apartments and masonettes had the lowest annual percentage increase, and that change increased by 4% in the 12 months to an average of £136,000. So really still affordable, especially if you're sitting in Fife. So what we tend to look at in regards to affordability, the average earnings in Fife at the moment is £32,000 per annum. What the banks will look at is 6 times income. So if you look at 6 times the 32,000, that's working out at about 190,000 basically is the affordability in regards to property. But if you can get an apartment or maisonette at an average price at 136, that's really an affordable price, isn't it? Which is fantastic news for everyone. When we then look at some of the other areas within Scotland, if we look at some of the islands, for instance, you can't really look at them in regards to what their volumes look like because there's just such a multiple difference, isn't there? Where we have maybe 20, they have 2. So it doesn't tend to fare correctly. But if we look at across the 12 months, what we're seeing is that the highest annual percentage change was in Inverclyde, East Lothian, and Aberdeenshire. So those areas have been heavily impacted in regards to the volumes of house prices, and that's the transactions that we're talking about. So transactions are properties exchanged, keys handed over, money in the bank, not necessarily what's under offer, because sometimes that doesn't happen. At the moment, in Fife, 82% of property that is on the market completes, and 18% is withdrawn for whatever reason. So it gives you a better understanding of what that may look like. But other indicators of the housing market fluctuate monthly, as we can see. 1 month doesn't set a trend, but we're going to go through and look at some of the stats relating to that. So I'm going to just again give you the highlighter comments here. So as you see, the highlighter headline stats there. So 192,000 is the average price of a property in Scotland. That's an increase of 6.4%. But across Scotland as a whole, the monthly change is 0%, but your annual change is 6.4, as I say. So the economic statement's given us some good insights to that. What we then look at is some of the impacts that make to that. So the average price, as I say, is 6.4% in the last 12 months. That average price has changed dramatically when you look at some of the property types. So if we look at, say, Aberdeen, for instance, Aberdeenshire, they were sitting at the moment, the average price in May of 200,569 versus May previously of 205. So they've actually decreased in price by 2.5%. If we then say go to the City of Dundee is faring really well actually. So they've got an increase in value over the last 12 months of 6.5%. The average price there has jumped from just under 135,000 up to just under 144. So faring well. If we look at Edinburgh, that's sitting the same. So they're sitting at about 6.6%. They've jumped from 273,000 up to 294. Glasgow, 8.3% increase as well. So again, faring really well when you compare that to the 6.4% average. So they're overperforming as a area within Scotland if you look at the average at 6.4. If we then jump to, say, Fife at the moment is jumped by 3.9%. So average price has gone from 161 up to 167. If we then look at Midlothian, it's gone up by 6.8. So that's 269,000 up to 287. The highest performing one, as I said earlier, is Inverclyde. That's jumped by 12.5%. The average property there is 113,000. So definitely see some changes there. If we look at West Lothian as well, 7.1%, so that's increased from 209,000 up to 224. So some real changes there. And if we look at that on a map basis, what we're looking at then is what does the property type look like? So what changes have happened there? So detached properties, as I mentioned earlier, they're the ones that are overperforming at the moment. So your average detached property compared to May of 25 to May of 24 has gone up by 9.3%, as I said earlier. So that's jumped from 327,000 up to 357,000. Your semi-detached has improved by 6.9, always really popular because you get a lot of house for a semi-detached and you generally get a lot of outside space as well. So they tend to fare quite well. Your average price in May of 24 was 201,000. That's now up to just under 216. Again, your terraced properties have gone up by 7.1. The average terrace is 174,000. Your apartments masonettes, as I mentioned earlier, they've gone up by 4%. So your average there is 136,000. There's lots of stats that I'm sharing with you, but there is a link in this post. So again, if you want to read through it, there's some really good graphics in there as well that you can really drill into. It's not always easy for you to see them on my screen, but there's some real good detail in there if you're interested in seeing that. What we then want to look at is the sales volume, as I mentioned earlier on. The sales volume really is about the transactions that are happening because that gives you a real good indicator as to the health of the property market, because transactions pretty much is what's making the market move. So we have to have the completions, but the transactions as well also support a lot within your supply chain locally as well in regards to people that assist you when you move. So your painter and decorators, your carpet fitters, your electricians, your plumbers, your removal firms, your gardeners. There's so much going on, isn't there? So the property market actually does have a widening range in regards to how it actually helps your local community and economy. So if we look at some of the transaction numbers, we're going to look at, say, Dundee, for instance. So March 24 to March 25, those transaction numbers have actually gone down. So they've gone down from 208 to 183. If we look at the City of Edinburgh, they've slightly gone down as well from 831 to 825. Glasgow, they have gone down slightly, 771 versus 881. If we jump, say, to Fife, Fife is actually stayed static, which is healthy. So transactions March 24 were 480, transactions March 25, 480. That's really healthy transactions for Fife. So it's great to see that that has stabilised. If we then look at, say, Midlothian has gone from 182 to 153. So actually, when you go through this, there isn't that many that have actually either stayed static or improved on their transactions. So to see that in Fife is a really healthy market. That's great for us, isn't it, at the end of the day? We then have a look at what is happening in regards to the funding status is always a good one. So those transactions, who is actually buying? And how are they paying for that? That's a really good way to look at it. So when we look at the types of property and who is buying, your property status types are Your new builds are sitting at 359,880, which is an annual change of 27.6%. But your existing resale properties, the average property price for March 25 was 173,000, just short of, and that was an increase annually of 3.1%. So great to see that that is happening. If we look at some of the stats again on the transactions over not just the year, but over the 5-year window, all volumes over Scotland, if we compare it to, say, March of 21, there was 12,235 transactions completed. If we look at March 22, that changes to 8,199. We all know what was happening in those 2 years. Then 23 is 8,146. We go into March of 24, which was 7,797, and March of 25, 7,495. So a slight decrease year on year. And we saw that just by looking at those transactions in the geographical spots, haven't we? Fife stayed at 480, but others have deteriorated by maybe 10 or 15 properties. So if you actually work that out, it's 1 or 2 a month, isn't it? So that's something to bear in mind. But interesting to see those new build numbers as well, and actually what the existing resales are going for in the averages. But again, how are the people paying for these properties? So what we've looked at as well is the people that pay cash and what the average amount is that they're spending. And then we're looking at people who have a mortgage and what amount of borrowings are they borrowing. This is really useful information because it's good for you to understand if you particularly have a property on the market at the moment and for whatever reason you've decided you want a cash buyer, it's good for you to understand how much a cash buyer on average in Scotland is spending, because that will give you a good indicator as to whether your property is likely to sell or whether you maybe need to speak with your agent and do a little bit of a revamp on who your buyer might look like. So at this moment in time, the annual change of a cash buyer has gone up by 5.3%. Your average cash buyer is spending £177,000. Now that's your average buyer. Of course, there will be other buyers out there that are paying more, but that gives you an understanding of the averages. So again, that's just food for thought in regards to maybe where you are in your property journey. If you're looking for someone that potentially is mortgage purposes, so generally mortgage buyers can secure a mortgage up to 95%. They can obviously have mortgages less if they've got equity to put into the property. When we look at mortgages on an average, they have increased by 7%, and your average mortgage buyer is spending just short of £200,000 on a mortgage. So that again gives you good indicators to your property if you've got it on the market and what that looks like in regards to where you're at. When we're talking about mortgages as well, I think it's really interesting for us to think about what's going to happen with interest rates. Obviously, UK inflation recently has been announced, and that's gone up to 3.6%. So that was unexpected, I think. The government was hoping to have it down to 2% by the end of this year, but actually it's increasing month on month. It was 3.4% month before, 3.6% just now. And there's many factors that impact that, but actually not a surprise, the factors that have impacted it this time round. So the price increases on the most products. So basically inflation is what are people spending their money on and what categories are they spending it on, and has that increased in what they're having to spend to enjoy the same thing. So what they're saying is that transportation has increased, food prices have increased, and we're all seeing that when we go to the supermarket, aren't we? The checkout, the bill always seems to be higher, doesn't matter how well you think you've shopped. Clothing. So again, this is a busy time of year. You've got lots of parents at the moment who are buying new school uniforms, etc., and clothing has gone up. So that's going to be an impact. And actually recreation as well. So with your recreation, that's things, activities for the kids, that's your hospitality. So if you want to go have lunch and dinner, you want to take the kids to the fair, the cinema, whatever, all of those things that again have impacted the inflation rates as well. Inflation as well is something that the Bank of England gauge with regards to what they next do with interest rates. So the Bank of England didn't meet in July, so there's been no change in the interest rate of 4.25. What the sounds and noises we're hearing are that when the Bank of England do meet again on the 7th of August, that they will review the interest rates, and there is talk that they will reduce it by 0.25, so potentially interest rates coming down to 4%. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually does appear and happen for us. The benefit of that, of course, is that then you're getting more bang for your buck, aren't you? You can borrow more money in regards to your mortgage, or if you're looking to not even sell a property and you're just remortgaging and you want to kind of align some of your bills, it's a great way if your mortgage rate is coming up for review and for renewal. Always really beneficial when you're doing that, though, to get in touch with a mortgage broker, get some real good financial advice, and they will guide you through what the best options are for yourself. But certainly on the Bank of England, when they meet on the 7th of August, it'll be interesting to see if they are going to look at reducing those interest rates by the expected 0.25%. So again, if they come down to 4%, every bit helps, and it allows you to perhaps free up some more additional money for the inflation that we're seeing just now on the products that maybe affect your home with your family and your school kids, etc. So as I say, all of the details about this are actually in the post. If you are someone who likes some detail, then take 10 minutes to go through it. If you've got some questions, or maybe you've had a remortgage, or maybe some of this information has impacted you, you've seen it beneficially or negatively, it'd be really great to get that feedback and share that with everyone. More than happy to answer any questions that you may have. But for now, that's me. I hope you've enjoyed the show. And as I say, any questions, please feel free to reach out. And it's Perrie at Fife Properties TV. Take care. Bye-bye.